to get some AC in here.
All right, so we talked about yesterday the bones, and we named all the various bones and talked about sort of what they're made of and so forth. Today what we're going to talk about is a couple other things. We're going to talk about joints, and then we'll talk more about muscle and other types of connective tissue, okay? So when we talk about a joint, your elbow joint, your knee joint, your hip joint, what we're referring to is a place where two bones connect in some way, okay? Where the bones meet. And there are several types of joints that are movable. There's one type that's not. But their names sort of make sense when you think about what the bones actually do. So one type of joint is called a hinge joint. Now, where have you heard of a hinge before? Yeah, on a door. So this door has three hinges over here. The hinges are what allow this door to swing in and out. But what you'll notice is this door only moves in one plane of motion, right? I can't lift this door up. I can't tilt it forward or anything. It just swings in a single direction, back and forth. And that's what a hinge joint in our body does as well. It allows for our bones to move in one single direction. So what would be an example of that? Where in our body do our bones move in just one direction? Benny?
Like our arms?
Yeah, your elbow. Your elbow allows your forearm to bend and come up, but if it's working properly, at your elbow, your arm doesn't move side to side, right? Okay, you can't move your arm left and right from your elbow. You can move your shoulder, but at the elbow, you can't move it side to side, right? You only do it by moving your shoulder. Your elbow only moves this up and down, doesn't move it left and right.
What about your wrist?
Yeah, so there's other types. So another example is your knee. If your knee is working properly, okay, it only swings forward and back. It shouldn't go left and right from your knee joint. And you can see when you look at the way the bones are set up, the way the bones sort of meet each other. This is the elbow joint up here. You can see that on the top of the humerus, or the bottom of the humerus, there's like a little indentation, and then in the radius, there's a little protrusion. They kind of fit together, and this little projection stays in that groove, allowing it to just move in one direction. Again, it's covered in cartilage to make that movement nice and easy and low friction. All right. Ball and socket joints have a wider range of motion. Ball and socket joints can move in several different planes of direction. Okay. So, an example, which joints in your body can move in a wide variety of directions? Sophia?
Your ankle or your, like...
Well, your ankle and wrist, we're going to get to a different one, but you're on the right track.
Fingers?
Well, fingers are another one as well.
Your neck.
Your neck's a little different.
Oh, your head. Oh, I was gonna say
No.
like someone you were gonna say.
Oh, wait. Your shoulder.
Your shoulder. Your
I
shoulder
was gonna say
can
that.
move, forward and back. It can move left and right, okay? It can rotate. So your shoulder can move in lots of different ways. And if you look at the top of your humerus, or it's easier even to see in the femur, if you look at the top of the femur, you have this ball here, okay? And this ball fits into a socket, okay, that's on the pelvis. And so when this fits in there, it can move in lots of different ways, okay? So this is a ball and socket. You can see up here, the top of the humerus makes the same kind of shape with the scapula and the clavicle. And so those types of joints allow for a wider range of movement. And where's another example besides your shoulder?
Your leg? No.
Well, what do we call that joint? What did I just take off of this guy? What is this joint here?
The hip?
Yeah, hip joint.
Oh, I was confused.
Okay.
Isn't that
So your hip, your shoulder, these are ball and socket joints. There are also things that we call gliding joints. And an example are your vertebrae. If you remember, your vertebrae is a whole bunch of bones stacked on top of each other. And each one is on one of these discs of cartilage, and they kind of slide over each other to allow for movement. Kind of glide on top of each other.
What does it do when you like crack your back? Like, what does it do?
Anytime you crack a joint, like you crack your knuckles or something, what you're really just doing is there's little pockets of air that are trapped within the joint, and when you crack it, you're releasing that air, and the little bubble of air kind of just pops.
Is that bad?
No, doesn't. It's not. People say cause arthritis or things like that. It doesn't really.
Because I always crack my back. Don't they say
I
like if
usually
you crack
crack
your
my
fingers,
knuckles.
that your fingers
My
can get
hand.
fat?
Yeah, that's not true. Those are like old
That you
wives' tales.
dislocate it.
And then there are pivot joints, which allow for sort of rotation. So like, for example, in your neck, okay, you could pivot your head left and right. Sorry.
I didn't see that.
Alright, got
So and then that leads us to one last type of joint, which is an immovable joint. So an immovable joint, also called a fixed joint, is where bones meet, but they don't move actually. They don't move relative to each other. An example is in your, what bone is this that we're looking at?
The skull.
No?
Oh, a cranium.
Cranium. And the cranium is made of several plates of bone that get fused together to form a fixed joint. Okay, and you can see that where that joint is here, but they're bonded together. There's no movement there. This area between these four plates is called the fontanelles. Okay, and there's one down here as well. That's where in a little baby the soft spot is, because these bones have not fully fused, and there's a gap between those bones there. Okay, Sophia?
You know how, like right here, I forgot what they're called.
Temple? Like
Yeah,
temple?
like if you chew, they like go like out.
Yeah, it's because you have like muscle in there
So
that allows
that
you.
doesn't- That's
It's not part of your skull yet. No, that's this area here, and there's connective tissue, muscle, and tendon that allow. That's where your muscles that allow you to draw, they attach there.
Is that
That person's
supposed
teeth
to be
needs
cracked?
to brush.
What?
Is the skull? Yeah. Is the
Yeah, that's
cranium
those.
supposed to be
What looks like it's cracked is actually where the bones are fused together.
cracked? Oh, okay.
Okay, so fracture. So let's talk about some problems with the skeletal system. There's lots of different examples. So fractures are common. How many people have broken a bone before? Okay. What'd you break? Benny?
I broke a lot of fingers. I broke my arm.
Your arm? What part of your arm? Your forearm or your upper arm?
Like,
Forearm, your ulnar radius.
Then you didn't break your nose.
Oh,
Fingers?
yeah, I broke my nose.
Yeah.
It just healed.
Recently.
The fingers, this bone right here.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Mandible?
Yeah.
Okay. So a fracture is a break. And there's different types of breaks that could happen to your bone. So one example here.
I dislocated this. Mr. Duras.
Yeah.
Like, when you look on a skeleton, it looks like the nose, like where the nose is flat.
Yeah.
Like, I broke my nose. How do you break it?
Because there is bone in there, it's up higher, it's called the bridge of your nose. Like you have your nose goes a little way with bone, and then the bone stops and the rest of your nose is cartilage. You can't really break the cartilage part, the soft part of your nose, but you can break the bone that sort of is at the top.
I broke the nose right here.
All right, so a fracture is just another word for a broken bone. Okay, and you could fracture any bone in your body. One common type of fracture in young people is something called a green stick fracture.
Whoa, baby.
And it's called a green stick fracture. It should make sense in a minute. So if you take like a dead twig you found on the ground and try to make a campfire and you snap it, right, it just snaps in half. What if you find like a fresh branch and try and do that?
It won't.
hard.
It's hard. It
It's
like
like more like
It won't.
it like kind of. It's
it
like
breaks, but what's
it's
left?
stuff. There's like moisture.
Yeah, there's like fibers like that are still attached that didn't break cleanly, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the type of fracture that often happens in young people. Because in young people, the bones haven't fully hardened and calcified yet. They're not as stiff and brittle as adult bones. And so sometimes they break, but they don't fully snap in half. They still stay connected in some way. And that's called a green stick fracture. You can see here. This person has a green stick fracture of what bone?
It's gotta hurt. Wait, oh, it's the shin, so it's their pelvic.
Tibia, correct. That's a tibia.
Come on.
Okay? So that's a green stick fracture. A simple fracture is a clean break of the bone. So when there's a simple fracture, you can just leave it up there anyway. The bone is completely broken, 2 pieces. So this person has a simple fracture of what bone?
Tibia? I can't tell.
Yeah, I can't tell what.
No?
Humerus? Is it
Well, you could tell by these bones. This bone here is part of what? That's part of the pelvis. So what bone would this be?
Oh, it's
the hips?
That's the femur. Okay, yeah, that's the hip. This is the hip joint. So this person has a fracture of femur, a pretty bad one. This would be extremely painful. Your femur is one of the largest, thickest bones in your body, and a fracture of femur would be very painful. This fracture is also displaced. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, out of
Yeah, that it's not lining up properly anymore.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay?
Like,
So if this person had this injury, they fractured their femur, they wouldn't be able to walk, they'd be in a lot of pain, they'd go to the doctor. What does the doctor have to do first? Sophia?
They have to first?
Well, what does the doctor have to do to help them heal first?
Well, they have to put your bone back in place.
Yeah.
They have to re-break
What do they don't have to re-break it.
They put it because they did it with my pinky because I dislocated.
Well, dislocate is something separate we'll talk about. So a dislocation is not a break, but they have to set the bone. And what that means is they need to realign it.
Yeah.
Because if they left this person's fracture this way, it might heal this way. But the bones are not properly aligned, and the healing would make this person's right leg would be shorter than their left leg. They wouldn't be able to bear as much weight because it's not aligned properly. So a doctor would have to get these bones into the proper placement so that they line up perfectly. Now, they might be able to do it just by holding onto a person and kind of realigning them manually. If it's really bad, yeah, it would hurt very badly. They might have to do surgery and actually open up a person's leg and realign those bones. Sometimes they have to use pins and things to hold everything in place. And after they set the bones, then what do?
They put a cast on.
They put a cast on. And what's the purpose of the cast, Vinny?
So it wouldn't go back how it was when it was broken.
Yeah, it's to hold those bones in place so that they can start to heal. Because bones heal very, very well. And new bone tissue fills in for that break. And if they're held in the same spot, it'll heal just as good as it was before. Okay? So they have to set it, then they cast it, and give it whatever time, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, for that bone tissue to heal. They usually will cast the joint above and below the fracture. So if you fracture your tibia in your shin, you probably get a cast all the way above your knee, okay? So that both those joints are immobilized, and so there's no chance of that tibia moving, okay? This person would need a full leg cast, okay, if they had this femur fracture. Yeah, Bailey?
Like you said, their leg, when done would be longer or taller. What if it was in an adult? Would that still happen?
Yeah, because if the bone weren't reset, yeah, it would heal and it would be shorter, right? Because those bones are kind of overlapping, so their right leg would be shorter than their because they're not properly aligned anymore. Sophia?
I broke one of my bones in 2 places, so then they had to do it what you said, put it back in place.
Yeah.
And it after they did because it was the top of my pinky and the bottom of my pinky.
Uh-huh.
So then they couldn't really. It was hard for them to tape it.
Yeah.
Because it was right.
Yeah, and sometimes with fingers and stuff, they often won't cast it. They'll splint them. They'll tape them together. Sometimes if it's just one finger to keep it still. Yeah. So it depends on where the break is. Vinny?
What happens if you broke your leg all the way up? What would happen? Would you have to get a full leg cast?
Yeah.
But if you have.
It'd probably go up to your hip and immobilize your hip too.
What?
So you won't be able to walk at all for this
My
time.
mom had
All right. Now the other thing that can happen is a compound fracture. Compound fracture is very sort of gory. So it's when the bone breaks but then pokes through the skin. Okay? Because a fracture, you have a jagged bone, and that could then puncture through the skin, and then that needs to be treated as well. So I think there is a picture here. If you don't like kind of gross things,
Yeah,
you don't
let's
need
see
to
it.
look. But I think there is a compound fracture picture here.
That's
That's
what-
just a drawing. The next one I think is a picture if it's still in.
Oh, God.
So you can see the bone. In this drawing, the bone is punctured through the skin.
Is it through their knee?
Yeah, that's tibia, I think. All right, so the next one is the actual
Oh, it's
picture.
gonna be so painful.
Okay.
They have to do a basketball.
So yeah, that's Kevin Ware. So that was from
God.
the NCAA tournament. Do you guys remember when that happened 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah.
So he fractured what bone?
Tibia?
Tibia. Okay, because you could still see his knee there. You could see, if you're looking, the bone here sticking out the top. That's his tibia. And so that's a very gory. So the people on the bench at the time this happened, that like saw it happen, they like freaked out because they saw this, and you know, it's something traumatic to see that happen to somebody.
Does he still play?
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look that up. A good question. All right, so the bone does heal though. Bones heal very, very well. Probably just as well as any other part of the body. And what happens is, you know, after there's a break, new bone tissue starts to form. It forms what's called spongy bone, which is not as dense, but starts to fill in. New blood vessels form until it fully forms. But even after it heals, you could probably always tell in an x-ray where the break was, because the part that healed is like bulged a little bit. It forms a bony callus. This sort of bulge here shows that. Okay, dislocation is another type of injury. It's different from a break because the bones aren't actually broken. They are just out of place. So this is a person that dislocated what joint?
Oh, they're humerus.
Yeah, their elbow joint, right? So this is their elbow joint. This is the humerus. And what you see here, the radius, is not in place. Usually, this little cup in the radius should fit into this little area in the humerus, but it's been dislocated. Okay, somehow got forcibly. Usually, ligaments hold this all in place, so it's nice and tight. You can't just like pull your radius away from your humerus. These ligaments hold in place, but sometimes like a trauma, a hit to that can damage the ligaments, stretch them, and then that bone comes out of place. That's what a dislocation is. And so what they have to do to treat this is basically get the bones back in alignment. The doctor here, this person might go to the doctor. It would be probably pretty painful. They wouldn't be able to move their forearm very well at all. And they would take, the doctor would usually just like get their forearm, pull on it to sort of move this down, and then sort of move it back into place so everything fits together very cleanly again. And then, you know, those ligaments would heal eventually and the joint would be almost like it was before, but often those ligaments don't fully heal. So like if you know somebody that's like dislocated their shoulder several times, a lot of times in sports in which you're checking or hitting or tackling, like if you go and you tackle somebody and there's a big force that you don't absorb with your body but just sort of your arm, it can force your shoulder joint out of socket. And then once it goes back in, it might be a little looser. And so that means it may be more likely to happen again because those ligaments aren't holding it in place as tightly. Like I've played basketball people where their shoulder sort of comes out of joint all the time and they just like, oh shoot, and they like, and get it back into place and keep playing because it's happened so many times, those ligaments are very loose. Sophia?
Is it like my shoulder pops like out of its socket?
That's dislocating. It might come out a little bit if there's looseness.
It like pops and then comes back.
Yeah, so it might just be coming out just a small amount.
Yeah,
Like a
because
bad, this would be a bad dislocation. Like you would look at this person's arm, you'd say, oh yeah, something's wrong there. But sometimes those joints could be loose and they just come out a little bit, go back in.
Because like when it was from like basketball, it started happening because like I fell
Yeah,
on it.
common dislocations are fingers, you know, that happens a lot, or shoulders. All right, I think there's another picture in here if you don't like those gross pictures.
Yeah, it's
of a
on-
person
yeah,
with,
it's on-
oh yeah, with a dislocated ankle. Oh, so write that down though first. So a dislocation is when a bone is forcibly moved out of the joint. And it's not in place anymore, and that joint obviously would not function properly. So here's the picture. This is a person that dislocated their ankle. So obviously this ankle should be pointing straight down, but it's off to the side there. Okay, and you can see in the x-ray that their ankle joint where the tibia connects is out of place. Actually, when they did this dislocation, they actually broke off a little sliver of bone when the ligaments were forced out of place, you could see the tiny little sliver of bone over here that shows that avulsion. All right. Let's talk a little bit about muscles, because our muscles would actually move our bone. Muscles is a type of tissue made of muscle cells. That basically what muscle can do is contract and get shorter, and then it can relax. There's 3 types of muscle in our body, each with different jobs to do. There's skeletal muscle, which are the muscles that actually move our bones. So your biceps and triceps and pecs and quadriceps, all those are skeletal muscles. They pull on our bones, and they allow us to move. And we have direct control over these. We decide how we move these skeletal muscles. What's the word for that? Muscles you have control over.
Oh, it's the
Voluntary. These are voluntary muscles. You control them with your brain.
what?
Does anyone know a type of, another type of muscle? Faith? Cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is a special type of muscle that's found in only one place in our body. Where is it? In your heart. Is it voluntary?
No, it's in
No. You don't have to say every second, oh, I should beat my heart. Oh, I better do it again. Oh my God, I better do it again. You don't have to think about it, right? It's involuntary. It's under control of your nervous system, but parts of your nervous system that just function on their own. And then there's the third type. Bailey? Smooth muscle tissue. Okay? This makes up many of our internal organs, like your stomach and your, there's some in your arteries and your intestine and so forth. Are these voluntary or involuntary? Involuntary. When you go to lunch next week, you're not going to have to think, oh, I better move that cheeseburger down into my small intestine, like work at it. Okay? They work on their own.
What if we had to do that?
It'd be weird, right? Like, oh shoot, those frosted flakes from breakfast are still in my stomach. Okay, all right, now I have room for my Pop-Tart I'm eating for lunch.
That's so weird.
That would be weird. There's many muscles in our body, over 600 that are named. An important thing is that muscles can only pull on our bones. They cannot push on bones. That may seem weird, but
Yeah, like
this is why muscles are often found in pairs. So for example, if you think about your arm, it's easy to envision. So in your arm, which muscle pulls your hand up towards your face?
This one, right?
No?
No.
Not this
This
one.
way.
What is this muscle called?
the bicep.
Yeah, your bicep muscle. Okay, so what happens? Hold your hand straight out. Your bicep muscle here is relaxed. It's long, it's loose, right? When you're going to curl your hand up, what's happening? If you feel your bicep muscle, what's happening to it?
It pulls.
It's shortening. It's getting more compact. What it's doing, it's pulling on your forearm, and it's pulling your hand up. Now, that bicep muscle right now, it's contracted. It can't push my hand back down.
It can't?
No.
No, because it can't push.
So how can my hand get back down?
From your elbow.
No?
The joints. Oh.
Yeah. There's another muscle. What muscle is this
The
called?
tricep.
Yes.
Yeah, tricep.
Right now, it's relaxed. As you put your hand back down, what happens to it?
It pushes.
No, it doesn't push.
What does it
It
do?
pulls it back down, and now your tricep is contracting. So your bicep contracts and pulls it this way, your tricep contracts and pulls it this way.
I forgot what it's called for a second. That's why I like that.
If you only had a bicep, you would do this, and then you have to go like that. You could pull your arm up, but then if you're done brushing your teeth, you'd have to put it back
Yeah, but
down
we
like
wouldn't be
that.
able to move this arm, so how would we?
I don't know.
move
Good,
that
good point. So our muscles work in pairs. You have the same thing, right? You have quadriceps and hamstring muscles in the front of your thigh. Okay. So your hamstring bends your knee. Okay. Then your quadricep straightens it out again. And when we exercise our muscles by using them, by stressing them, by lifting heavier weights or by running farther or faster and so on. We stress those muscles, and the way that they recover from that stress is they do what?
They get bigger.
They get bigger. They increase in size. They increase in efficiency. So as you run more often, over a period of time, your muscles get better at it, and you get faster. It gets easier. If you're lifting weights, you use the same weight, it gets easier and easier. You can lift harder and harder weights. Your muscles grow in size because they're adapting there. So there's a picture of somebody I know that used to be a bodybuilder.
Is it Mr. Arcurius?
They obviously stopped working out a long time ago, but yeah. So people can develop their muscles to quite extreme measures.
That looks so big.
The legs look really weird.
Yeah, I know.
What the heck?
This is a picture, and throughout this these notes, we have a bunch of pictures from an exhibit. This was in New York City. I think it's still there. This is called the Bodies exhibit, and what they did is they actually took people that donated their body after they died, and they have displayed certain parts of them to show the anatomy behind humans.
Wait, they're real?
Yeah, these are real muscles of real people. They're put in different positions, and
That's an
sometimes
outrage.
they take away the muscle. You could, some of them have just the blood vessel and so forth. But this is an exhibit that showed the muscles, and you can see all the various muscles of the body. These people are playing football or something.
Thank you very much.
Okay, there's another example. This is somebody,
Ew.
they removed the skin from this person,
What?
leaving just the muscle,
Ew.
and this person's actually holding the skin that they removed from them.
That's gross.
Is he still alive?
It's real. These are real
It looks
people.
like animal fur.
The shorts are fake.
It's like I don't even know.
Why'd you put
The
shorts
Mr.
on?
Curry put the shorts on today.
Oh!
Because it showed all the full anatomy, which, we don't need to see that.
Yeah.
We'll get to the reproductive system later.
Let's
All right.
You don't have to.
We have to. So finally, we talked about these things a little bit already. Tendons and ligaments. Tendons connect to what to what?
Oh,
Bones to-
joint or bones to joints.
No.
No, boys.
Muscles to joints.
Muscles to bones.
Oh, that's cool.
Think
That's
about
what I
like your
thought.
Achilles tendon connects your calf muscle to your heel bone.
I was gonna say that, but then I just got confused for a second.
You can feel them in different parts of your body. So again, stretch your arm out and curl a little bit up and feel in your elbow. Feel like right here. So bend your elbow a little bit and feel on the inside of your elbow. There's like something. It feels like a bone. It's not a bone.
It's not. It's
No,
a joint.
that's a tendon.
Oh.
That's the tendon that connects your biceps muscle to your radius. You could feel them in the back of your behind your knee. Like if you partially bend your knee, you can feel those things on the back side of your knee. Those are your tendons. They're connecting your muscles to your bones. That's the Achilles tendon. The muscle basically turns into tendon, and that's what attaches to the bone. I think the next slide might be a real picture if you
No,
want
there's
to
not because we have to answer the
Yes, it is.
Oh my, why is he picking it up?
This is because this is a person that ruptured their Achilles tendon, and the doctor is going to reattach it to their heel. The doctor's holding on to the tendon, okay? And they've cut open the back of their
I thought that was
to
a
reattach it.
scalpel.
No,
I don't-
that's the actual tendon. They're white. The muscles are like pinkish red, but when they turn into the tendon, they're white. Okay, it's gone.
Yay. I don't
Um,
know what doctor-
so again, this shows tendons, and then it also shows ligaments. Ligaments, remember, hold our bones together to make our joints.
You don't need to show the real picture, but.
So those are tendons, these are ligaments. We have a bunch of ligaments that keep all our finger bones together because there's a lot of little bones in there.
Dude, it's
This one,
That's awesome.
you can see the tendons inside a person's hand actually moving if this video plays.
Come on, I want to see it.
Little friend. I can't see.
Once I searched up on the my friend told me to search up on the internet motorcycle accidents while wearing flip flops. And
All right, I guess the video part doesn't work. So if you sprain something, what's a common joint to sprain?
Your ankle.
Your ankle,
Yes.
right? So an ankle sprain is when you force the ligaments to move too far and they actually tear or partially tear. And that is an ankle sprain. It leads to swelling, it's painful, it's hard to walk and so forth. Eventually, usually those ligaments can heal, but it takes some time.
I sprained my
There's a picture of a person that actually sprained their ankle. You can see how swollen it is as they do that.
I sprained both of my wrists.
I sprained my ankle, I think.
There are also problems that can happen with tendons. Tendons can be strained. You could strain your Achilles tendon, for example, where it partially tears from the bone. Your tendons can get inflamed. That's called tendonitis. Sometimes tendons lock in place and they can't release very well. Golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, when the tendons come out of their sheathing. So there's lots of different problems of tendons and ligaments that commonly affect people. Okay?
We don't have that page.
You don't have that slide at all?
No.
All right, it's just some examples of different
How do you
tendons.
have tennis elbow?
It's just because of sometimes overuse or damage to those tendons, and it gets inflamed and painful, and they may tell you like to rest. Do you have tennis elbow? Have you had it?
I have it. Yeah, I play.
Okay. And so yeah, it's just sort of an injury where it just happens sometimes. Like in any sports, something gets sore and inflamed, and sometimes you have to rest or take anti-inflammatories and so on.
Tendonitis sounds like a disease.
It sounds like a doctor and stuff.